The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 21.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders and the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "What authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say from heaven, he will say to us, 'Why then do you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd. All regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' And he answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second son and said the same. As he answered, 'I go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?" And they said, "The first." And Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness. You did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. Even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. This week we are concluding our worship series of Embracing Mercy. Throughout the last 4 weeks we've looked at this concept of mercy, why it's so important for us to embrace mercy in our lives, embrace it in our worldview, in our inner being, in the core of who we are. Mercy is so important to the building up of our faith, and to experiencing the power of God in our lives. We've also been examining how every situation in our life is a moment when we can embrace mercy. Several weeks ago, we looked at conflict and confrontation, how those are incredible opportunities to embrace mercy. Last week, we looked at the difference between a complaining spirit and a lamenting spirit. And we discovered that embracing mercy is a way to drive a complaining spirit out of our heart. This week, as we follow our gospel passage, we're looking at this concept of fear and how embracing mercy can be such a crucial part of driving fear out of our lives. Our gospel story is one where we're getting just a quick glimpse at what is happening in the final week in the life of Jesus. Jesus has returned to Jerusalem. He's going to die at the end of the week. He's already entered Jerusalem. We've already had Palm Sunday, and this basically happens on Tuesday. See, on Monday, Jesus had that episode of cleaning out the money changers in the temple. You remember that, I think, right? Jesus showed up, and in the courtyard of the temple, there's all these money changers and businessmen. And what they're doing is they're taking advantage of worshipers. When people travel from afar to come and worship, and they're required by law to give sacrifice at the temple, they would come and they would bring their animals, and there'd be kind of a scheme going on between the priests and the religious leaders. Basically, whatever animals they brought to give as a sacrifice in worship would be declared not good enough, not clean enough, not white enough, not pure enough, or whatever reasons they would come up with. And so the people would have to go, they'd have to buy a pre-approved type of animal for sacrifice. And of course, the prices were gouged, they were exorbitantly high. And Jesus came in, and it angered him when he saw that innocent people who traveled from afar had been taken advantage of. They weren't being allowed to worship because they were being gouged for high prices. So priests and these money changers could make a huge profit. And so Jesus cleaned out the temples. He drove them out in anger and frustration over how people were being treated. The next day he comes back to the temple, and that's the scene that we have today. That's when all of a sudden now even the higher up and ups, the people who never get their hands dirty but always are in on getting their share, they show up, and these are even more important religious leaders, and they're saying to Jesus, "But what authority are you willing to do? Can you do all of this?" And of course, they're challenged because Jesus has a crowd following him. There are people observing and seeing. And so if they condemn Jesus and they do something out in the open, they're afraid of the crowd and what's going to happen. So they're trying to trick him. And they do this all throughout the week. If you read Matthew chapter 21 and 22, you'll see scenario after scenario on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and even up till Thursday of this week, of that Passion Week, when they're trying to entrap Jesus by asking him trick questions so they can somehow declare him being unlawful, so they can get rid of him. And that's what's happening today, as we read this situation. And of course, Jesus is not going to have anything to do with what they're asking. He always sidesteps, or always asks them a question in turn, turning the conversation around on them. As I read this, it always stands out to me how these are the people who are supposed to be the shepherds. These are the people that are supposed to be caring for those people who are seeking to worship God, but instead taking advantage of them. And I'm thinking, why is it that they're so anti-Jesus? Why do they want to kill Jesus? Because at this point, they've already decided they're going to kill Jesus. They just haven't figured out how to make it happen yet. So why? How can they meet Jesus and respond in such an ugly and horrifying way? And I think a lot of it has to do with fear. The Pharisees are afraid. Deep down inside their bones, they're afraid of who Jesus is, what he represents, how he treats people, and how he's going to change their lives. They're afraid because Jesus represents the loss of their power, the loss of their status, the loss of their privilege, the loss of their accomplishments. And most of all, the loss of them being special people who can control the lives of others. They're afraid of losing all of that because all of those things are wrapped up and form their identity, who they are. They're afraid. And they're allowing fear to drive them, to lead them. And that's what's going to lead them to killing an innocent man. There's a quote, and go ahead and put the quote up there. I brought this up a couple weeks ago when we started this series. And it's a great quote. Let me read it for you. Fear of death always turns into fear of life, into a stingy, cautious way of living. It's not really living at all. To follow Jesus means going beyond the limits of our own comfort and safety. It means receiving our lives as gifts instead of guarding them as possessions. What happens when fear captures our heart? When fear begins to dictate how we live, how we treat others? What normally happens is that, as the quote says, fear of death or fear of losing something turns into a fear of living. We begin to build up walls that we think we're building in order to protect ourselves, but instead those walls become barriers. And those barriers prevent us from seeing other people for who they really are. Instead, we see stereotypes, we see images, we see pictures, we see gross generalities of people. We don't see people anymore because the barriers prevent us from doing that. The barriers also allow us to fall victim to the propaganda that we get from both the conservative and the liberal side of culture that continues to help us not see people, but instead see enemies, see people who we think are going to threaten or take away our way of living. And the result is we no longer feel an urgency to love one another. We don't feel an urgency to love one another because we don't actually see one another. Instead, we just fear losing whatever we're holding on to too tightly. So what do we do? What do we do when fear captures? How do we battle against fear? Well, we embrace mercy. The passage that we read in Philippians is a part of a worship song that the early church formed. Philippians chapter 2, Paul's quoting this incredible song. He's sitting in prison while he's doing it, which is so amazing. And the song is simply a recounting of who Jesus is and what Jesus has done and what Jesus has gifted us. What Jesus has done is he's died for us. So that this ugly life that we have, that we're holding on to too tough, that we view as a possession, something that we own, that we have to protect, something that we wrap our identity around. We give that up in exchange for a gift of a new life. A gift that we don't hold on too tightly, the gift of life that we can use to help others experience the power of mercy. You know, any parent who has had a child when it's bedtime, and you go to the child and you want them to go to bed, and all of a sudden they start talking, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. The worst thing you can do is say, don't be afraid, because it's not going to help anything, right? If you have a friend who's consumed with fear, and you come to them and say, there's no reason to be afraid, what's the next thing they're going to do? Continue to be afraid. If you tell someone, just don't be afraid, don't think about it, the next thing they're going to do is think about it. When fear captures our hearts and our lives, it's hard to stop being afraid. That's why we need to embrace mercy. That's why we need to replace that fear instead of focusing on losing something, whether it's our safety or it's our life, whether it's our status, whether or not it's a possession that we value too much. We focus on every opportunity in life as being a chance to embrace mercy, to demonstrate and show people the love of God and the mercy that God has. That's why embracing mercy is so important. That's why getting around shaping our lives around this concept that every opportunity is a chance to show mercy helps drive the fear away. And as we drive the fear away, the barriers come down. And as the barriers that we build between us and others come down, we begin to see people as real people. And we begin to love people with the urgency that God has placed in our hearts. As Jesus shares this message, or as he responds to the Pharisees and their fear and their accusations, and they're trying to pin him and to trap him with words, he responds with this parable about two sons, and one going out to work in a vineyard and the other not. And then he follows it up with an explanation. He says, see, tax collectors, prostitutes, the people who you reject, the people who you see as not real people, that aren't allowed to come and worship because they're unclean, the people whom you take advantage of, those people are in the kingdom of God. Why? Because they are not allowing the fear of this life to control them. Instead, they are actually working in the vineyard. They're doing something that you're supposed to be doing. They're caring for those who are lost, hungry. They are looking at their lives. It's not something that tells them how good they are, what kind of status they have. Instead, they're looking at their lives as opportunities to share the mercy that they have received from God with other people. That's what they're doing. You're not doing it, he said to the religious leaders. You're not working in the vineyard, even though you already told God you would. That's why they have a place in the kingdom of God. It's a powerful story when we break it down. We begin to listen. Instead of listening to our fear, we begin to listen to the words of Jesus. We take hold of mercy. We say, this is an important concept. This is how we want to live our lives. Not by fear, but by seeing every opportunity as a chance to embrace mercy. Amen?
Amen.
Our takeaways for today. And again, our takeaways are always the truths that we discover that we can hook our faith on and take home with us. First one is fear enslaves us and prevents us from living the life that God has given us. Because of fear, we build barriers that prevent us from seeing people the way they really are, which prevent us from having the urgency to love them as God loves them. And the second one is our lives are a gift given to us that we can show the world God's mercy. Let's stand for our song of the day.